Hi everyone, okay, this is Magnus Carlsen against Wang Yue, which was played at the M-Tel Masters Tournament in Sofia, Bulgaria, earlier today. And this victory secured Carlsen the lead in the tournament by half a point over Alexei Shirov with only one game remaining. And it's those two who will play tomorrow in the final game. So that'll be interesting to see. And this was a good solid game from Carlsen, who created imbalance and pressurized his opponent into blundering. He had the white pieces anyway and opened with c4, which is the English opening, to which Wang Yue, who is China's top player by the way, responded with c6, which was an interesting choice in itself. Wang Yue is an expert in the Slav defense to the Queen's Gambit, and that is what the game transposed into after d4 and d5. So then came knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, all fairly standard stuff, and here Yue played a6, which is the Chebanenko variation of the Slav defense, a favorite of his, and an opening with which he beat Carlsen earlier in the year at the Linares tournament. And so it's no wonder he chose it again here. Not only does he know the lines well, but there's also a psychological factor too, as he'd beaten Carlsen with it before, and of course they will both remember that. So then came c5 from Carlsen, bishop f5, and knight h4, which is an early deviation from the book lines, and although it lessens White's control of the center, at least temporarily, it also forces Black to either lose the tempo or the bishop pair, and he opted for the latter with bishop g6. So then came bishop f4, knight on b to d7, knight takes g6, and h takes g6. So now White has the bishop pair, and he has damaged Black's pawn structure slightly, and that's two advantages already. And there is some compensation in the open h file, and here Carlsen spent the tempo giving his bishop a decent retreat square with h3, so the bishop can come to h2 if necessary. And it's really fine to do this because White has no direct threats, so the loss of tempo is nothing serious. So then came b6 from Wang Yue, which is better than, say for example, e5, because then d takes e5, knight h5, bishop h2, and that would favor White, definitely. So b6 and c takes b6, queen takes b6, and rook b1, which is the safest way to defend the b pawn here, and it's only logical to bring a rook to the semi-open file. The only drawback is that it's now easy for Black to play c5. Another possibility here was rook c1, and if queen takes b2, then queen a4, which is sharper but more or less equal, and it allows Black some penetration into the white position. So Carlsen, as usual, chooses the route that allows his opponent the least amount of counterplay with the rook b1. Then came e6 and e3, just strengthening the center as Black is about to play c5, which challenges White's center. So then comes a3, which is stopping bishop to b4 check in some lines and intending to expand on the queen's side. So then came bishop d6 from Wang Yue, and he could have given Carlsen an isolated pawn here by playing c takes d4 and then e takes d4, and the d pawn is isolated, but at least for the moment it is not much of a problem, and Carlsen has the bishop pair, and any opening of the board favors him. So Yue didn't go for that, and he played bishop d6. So then came knight a4 and a forcing continuation with queen c7, bishop takes d6, queen takes d6, knight takes c5, and the pressure here is mounting on the a6 pawn. So knight takes c5 is really the only move. And then comes d takes c5 and queen takes c5. And at this stage White is slightly better. He has a bishop against the knight, a queenside pawn majority, which will prove decisive later, and Black has double g-pawn, so that's three advantages. Or you can see it as three weaknesses that Black has. So queen a4 check from Carlsen, which is the most aggressive continuation. King e7, bishop d3, a5, and king e2, which is an interesting continuation. Castling wasn't too dangerous here despite the open h file, and Carlsen may have been anticipating the exchange of queens if he was to play b4 on his next move, in which case his king is not in any danger at all in the center. But it didn't happen that way after all, as Yue played rook h8, wisely bringing more troops to the queen side where it looks as though most of the play is going to be. So then came rook hc1, And here Yue made the right decision and gave his queen for 2 rooks. But queen takes c1, rook takes c1, and rook takes c1. And 2 rooks are generally stronger than 1 queen, and the difference here is that Carlsen has immediate play with b4, exploiting the pin on the a5 pawn if it takes and the rook's falling. And here Yue played king f8, which is just trying to get his king safe from tactical threats, because white has the queen here, active queen. But it's quite a passive move, and indeed the start of some passive play from Yue that loses him the game. Better here, instead of king f8, would have been e5, with a better position and more counterplay than in the game continuation. Like, it might continue here, queen b5, rook a c8, b takes a5, e4, and now the bishop has much less scope. And so a sample continuation would be bishop b1, rook 1 c7, and this continuation, black has to blockade the pawn, white reroutes the bishop, and then there's a more or less forcing continuation, and rook c2 check picks up the bishop, but it loses the rook in the end after f4 check, king e6, queen b6 check, king f5, queen b1 check, king e6, and queen takes a2, and say rook takes a6. And although white has a significant advantage here, still his task of winning the game is made much harder than in the game continuation with king f8 at this stage. So then came b takes a5, and white now has 2 passed pawns, and king g8 from Yue, another passive move. Again, e5 could have been tried here, probably should have been tried. So a6, rook c7, queen f4, rook ca7, queen d4, and now he has the idea of bishop b5 to c6, threatening this rook, and if it moves then the queen can take the rook on a7. So Yue countered with knight e4, and taking the knight here would be a big mistake by Carlsen, because then it's very hard for white to queen his pawns due to the doubled rooks on the a file, and it may even lead to a draw. So Carlsen played actively with queen b6, which prevents knight d6, which would be a good square for the knight, and it could later come to c4 and maybe exchange off the bishop, and 2 rooks against the queen, probably be a draw. And what Yue is doing here is preventing bishop b5, because if that was played, say on the next move, then knight c3 would pick up the bishop. So here Carlsen calmly played king e1. E5 was played here, and then Carlsen calmly played king e1 to stop that fork on the bishop if it was at b5. And now Carlsen has a large advantage. Knight g5 was played by Yue, and then bishop b5, knight e6, a4, d4, a5, and this is a good move and allows bishop c6, and if black were to take the a pawn, if bishop c6 was played, like say for example if Yue had played king h8 or something like that here, then bishop c6, after rook takes a6, then bishop takes a8 would be playable, because after rook takes b6, a takes b6, and white should be winning this endgame fairly easily. But as it happened, Yue blundered at this stage, and after a5 he played rook c7. The pressure just was too much and he crumbled. After bishop c6 he resigned, as the game is totally lost. Sample continuation would be, say for example, rook f8, preserving the rook, a7, rook c c8, bishop b7, rook c d8, queen c6, and black's totally passive, he just can do nothing to stop the queening and the loss of a rook, so it's all over. And it's a brilliant game from Carlsen, who only needs a draw tomorrow for first place in the tournament, so it'll be great to see how that goes, and I'll make a video of it whatever happens. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Please leave any comments or thoughts. Thanks very much.